Apparently today is lawnmower day in Stanton. Today we're looking at the Yongnuo 25mm f1.7, similar to the Panasonic Lumix counterpart, the Lumix 25mm 1.7. What I've noticed about Yongnuo is they tend to undercut the competition, not significantly, but enough to make you take a second look at their lenses. Now I will say this lens does struggle in a few areas, but there is one area that this lens excels in. You typically get what you pay for, and I've really learned that if you're going to be investing professionally, I would highly recommend saving your money and investing in some better quality glass. If you're a micro four thirds shooter and you're looking to upgrade from the kit lens, this Yongnuo could be a good option for you. As a disclaimer, Yongnuo did send me this lens for free, which I'm really grateful for, but it does skew my perspective a little bit because I didn't pay for it. So technically speaking, this is a biased review, but I'm gonna do my best to stay as objective as possible. All right, let's take this lens out in the field and see how it goes. So I'm gonna go over behind here, get some boring, I guess, B-roll of that little cage or whatever it is. So we're gonna get a little bit of backlit sun. It's a little harsh. It's not too bad, but we'll see what this lens can do in this situation, and then we'll go from there. So you can see those leading lines leading up to the lock. Nothing too fancy, just nice, depthy sort of shot. Fighting a little bit of stabilization here just because it's at 50mm equivalent, but seems to look fine. This would also work nicely as a static shot. All right, the focus just jumped. That's strange. For the second shot, we're gonna try to shoot through, get these flowers. I don't think we'll be fighting flares much on this one, but we shall see. I'm gonna frame it up with the bars slightly. For the second to last B-roll shot, we're going to just get some of these leaves, again with the sun backlit, and we'll see how this lens does. All right, as the park lawnmowers descend, I wanted to do this last shot, which is just a product shot with a tripod on the table. Again, this is outside, backlit, and I'm focused on the Fuji emblem itself. So from here, we're just gonna do a left to right. And honestly, I really think this looks good. All right, now we're gonna eliminate the ND entirely. And we're just going to rack up the shutter speed just so you can see exactly what this lens is doing. You'll see here closer to the bottom of the frame, we've got some pretty funky flares. Like this is almost direct sunlight coming into the lens at this point. So this probably is a bit much to ask. So when it comes to sharpness at 1.7, you can definitely notice some softness throughout the frame. And there isn't much difference at f2 either. I'd say they're pretty usable, but it's just something to be aware of. At 2.2, it starts to clean up some purpley contrast fringing, and at 2.8 and f4, you can really start seeing things get a lot cleaner. I think for me, I'll probably stick with shooting at f2.2 with this lens, but if you have a wider shot with multiple subjects, I would definitely recommend stopping down to 2.8 or f4. Backlighting is one area that this lens does suffer in. You'll notice in the corners that you get some really funky, colorful, or pretty, depending on how you look at it, flares. Personally, I would shoot in the shade if you are dealing with direct sunlight in any way. When it comes to focusing, earlier the manual focus did end up skipping, which was really strange. I think that probably had to do with the focus by wire and the G85, something funky happening electronically. So no idea why it did that, which is a little unnerving. But I haven't had that issue when the lens is sitting on my G85 for hours on end shooting an event. I never really had an issue after that. So I think it's just when you're manually focusing that you're gonna get an issue with this lens, which kind of sucks because autofocus is terrible on everything else. But it's definitely something that makes me a little nervous when it comes to reliability. And that brings me to a huge con or pro, depending on how you look at it, part of this lens, and that is the insanely long focus throw when you're manually focusing. It takes multiple turns to get this lens to manually rack focus from background to foreground, which really makes rack focusing pretty much impossible. But the fact that this lens has such a long focus throw leads me to some of my final thoughts. So at this point, shooting outdoors with any sort of direct sunlight really makes this lens difficult to use. Plus, the fact that it's probably impossible to manually focus on moving subjects makes this lens not your go-to lens if you're going to be a run and gun style shooter. But I did share that this lens does excel in one particular area, and that is, ironically, indoor B-roll controlled shooting environment. When you're able to control the light, this lens can actually get some really nice product shots in my case. And when you pair that with the really long focus throw, really nice when you have to really dial in your focus on a logo or an emblem or whatever you might be shooting. So on the table in a product shot environment, this lens is fantastic. So I ended up getting some really great shots with this lens, and I'm sure if you have the right environment, you can get some really nice shots with this lens as well. Anyways, I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you guys next week.